and welcome to episode 79 of Battlefield 4 News. So this is a CTE update episode because they're currently patching the CTE servers every single day to fix bugs, resolve problems and address some of the balancing issues. So this episode is going to cover patches 21, 22 and 23. So patch 21, and they fixed an exploit near Capture Point E, which is the broken in half aircraft carrier on Paracel Storm. Don't know what the exploit was, but they fixed it. They've disabled the updates on the bomb carrier's location on regular versions of Obliteration. They fiddled around with this quite a lot trying to get it to work, and it's essentially a big icon that appears over the bomb carrier and lets you know exactly where the bomb carrier is. Now, they fiddle around with the timings on this. Originally it was always on, you always knew where the bomb carrier was. Then they changed it so it updated every few seconds, but it's not been a popular change and they've never quite got the balance right, so they reverted it back to the original system and then they'll look at it again in the future. So when the CTE patch hits live, there'll be no changes to this UI. They fixed some UI problems. A couple of these are to do with the start of a round. At the start you now have to click a box to say that you're ready. When enough players are ready, the round will go into a countdown. At the end of the countdown, the round will start. The number of players needing to be ready for a round to start is now based on how many players there are on the team with the lowest number of players. So you won't get an imbalance. Before you could get 10 players needing to be ready on one team, 8 players needing to be ready on another team because they had fewer players. Now both teams will just need 8 players ready. And if a player switches teams while in the deploy screen, that is now taken into account when working out the number of ready players. They fixed the chain link information bar, so that now changes visibility along with the other game mode bars. And they fixed the spacing issue between the deathmatch game mode bar and the mini-map, because the mini-map can now change size. They've adjusted the red dot reticles on medium and long range sights for sniper weapons, except the 338 Recon, and they've adjusted the red dot reticles on all the DMR weapons. So they've done this for most of the other weapons already. What they did was make the reticles slightly smaller and a slightly deeper colour reddy orange so that they stand out from the background better. They fixed the animations for LMGs using iron sights, so when you stop firing the animations synchronise with that stopping firing. And they've put a potential fix in for characters going out of sync when in a knifing animation. So it's probably happened to you a few times where either the enemy just stands there and doesn't go through the animation at all, but you get knifed, or if you're knifing an enemy, they're not actually in front of you anymore when you kill them. This is patch 22 and we've got another rollback. So the volume increase on third person soldier footsteps and balancing that with the background volume has been rolled back because it caused an awful kind of white noise hissing sometimes. The defibrillator sounds have been tweaked so it's louder and it doesn't blend into the background noise quite so much. Various sound effects in game actually quieten down other sounds when they go off. That doesn't happen now with the defibrillator charge, so you know it's at full charge and you can give them a fully charged blast. They fixed an issue on the diffuse mode whereby the character screen wouldn't correctly disappear at the start of the round. Now this is probably because they've made changes to all the round starts, but diffuse has its own custom round timer, so it probably caused a clash that meant the character screen just lingered a bit. And on the UI they fixed an issue where north, south, east and west weren't showing up in the Chinese version of the game. Patch 22 had quite a lot of weapon fixes. The first of these was that if you were shooting when you were killed, when you got revived, your weapon spread was still set to what it was when you got killed. So if you'd been firing LMG for full auto for a while and then got killed, your weapon spread would be terrible. Now it resets it back to as if you haven't fired a shot. and they fixed a similar problem with switching weapons. So if you fired off your LMG, switched to your pistol, switched back to your LMG would still have the large spread. It hadn't been reset. Now it does reset it properly back to as if you haven't fired a shot. PDWs have received a slight buff, and it is a very small buff, to their aim down sight accuracy. Bullpup PDWs and bullpup carbines have had their modifiers rearranged slightly so that they better reflect the fact that they're a carbine and a PDW. Before they were working off general bullpup stats that applied to any gun in the game that was a bullpup. The heavy barrel's minimum spread bonus has been reduced slightly, but they've also reduced the spread increase per shot. So you will start with a bit more spread, but when you fire, the spread won't increase as quickly. So the spread you're going to get is going to be a bit more predictable through all the rounds you fire. Magazine-fed LMGs are now slightly more accurate than their belt-fed and drum-fed counterparts when you're moving. There's no difference when you're standing still, but when you're moving now, the magazine-fed LMGs are slightly more accurate. For vehicle weapons, the LMGs now project their damage out a bit further than they used to, so their damage over range is better, and the heavy machine guns are now more accurate. Not sure that was a change that needed making, but they've done it anyway. And the changes they said they made to the Scout Helicopter's 25mm cannon have finally been made. They've reduced the blast ranges at which you take full damage from the 25mm cannons. And now we're on to patch 23. Now there was a bit of an update on this one, saying that after this patch there will be no more releases and no more updates. All they're going to be doing from patch 24 onwards is stabilising what they plan on releasing to the live servers. There's also a warning to anybody who hasn't played CTE for a while that if you come back to the game you have to uninstall CTE and reinstall it from scratch, because the new version of the CTE client is 37 gigabytes. Yep, it's a massive thing. It's almost the size of the regular release game. On to the changes, and the first of these is a HUD UI change. They've added a 3-minute timer to the start of rounds, even if there aren't enough players for the round to start. So, you used to be able to jump onto an empty server, run around and have fun, but of course with the ready timer at the start of rounds now, a lot of servers were sitting there with nobody on, and when you jumped on, you couldn't actually get into the game to mess around because the ready timer was sitting there and there was nobody ready on the opposing team. Now if it sits there for more than 3 minutes, it's just going to start the round anyway, so you'll be able to jump in and still run around on an empty server. They've also stopped morons from just sitting there clicking on the ready button, because what it did was it would check the box, uncheck the box, check the box, uncheck the box, and the counter on the screen would go absolutely ballistic when you got 2 or 3 people doing that. So they've stopped people doing that. It's amazing that you have to adapt your game to the lowest common denominator of moron who will just sit there looking at a button and go click it, click it, click it, click it, click it. Idiots. And now on to the interesting stuff. So here's a message from Undead Pixels about the weapons. So these notes aren't full, but they do tell us what's going on. The SAR-21 now counts as a bullpup. Even though it is a bullpup gun, it hasn't counted as a bullpup before. All low rate of fire weapons have had their horizontal recoil reduced. Now they've done this to help them out at long range. The reason for this is that, like I said in my thoughts on CTE video, the low rate of fire weapons were completely useless at close range because they were outgunned by pistols. So to try and counteract this, they've given them extra bonuses at long range. I'm not sure if this includes DMRs, but I hope it does. However, there are 2 buffs directly to DMRs. The first of these is that all DMRs have had their bullet velocity increased. So this is kind of to make up for the increased movement speed, which makes players a bit trickier to hit at range, but it's also to give DMRs a buff at range because they're now pretty useless at close range. They've also given an extra magazine to a lot of the DMRs. Not to all of them, but to a lot of them. And I'll try and work out which ones have got the extra magazine and which ones haven't. And shotgun slugs have also had a slight increase in velocity to counteract the increased movement speeds. The CZ75 has had a buff in its accuracy, and it's also received a penalty in its accuracy while moving that kind of balances that out. So while you're moving with the CZ75, the accuracy is going to be about the same, but while you're standing still, the CZ75 is going to be quite a bit more accurate, turning it into a better long-range firearm. The Deagle, however, has had its second nerf. The first nerf to the Deagle was that it had its bullet velocity reduced, making it not as good at range. This second nerf to the Deagle again affects its use at range. It now only has a maximum damage of 28 at range. Now these two nerfs are basically to separate the Deagle from the Magnum. The Magnum is now back as being the best long-range pistol. The Deagle is kind of the mid-range pistol now. They've slightly lowered the rate of fire on the Gold Magnum. Now the Gold Magnum is probably the most popular sniper rifle out there, and the reason they've lowered its rate of fire is because it was too good. It seems like somebody out there has been listening to my moaning. Well, not just me, but to everybody moaning about some of the changes they've made. So they've reverted a few. The Stinger and Igler have had their turning speed reverted back to the old values. So they haven't nerfed the Stinger and Igler, and jets now can't outturn the missiles. The guns that are collectively known as the 1000 RPM club. Okay, they're not all 1000 RPM, they're like 900 and above. But those guns have had the changes made to them reverted as well. So that's the MP7, the AEK and the CZ3A1. The nerfs they gave those, everybody hated. These are all pretty much close range guns, and increasing their accuracy in exchange for reducing their killing power just doesn't really work, because when you do try and use those close range guns at medium range, because they've now got accuracy, well, they're outclassed by all the good guns at medium range anyway. So whatever change they decide to do to these guns, it's got to keep them effective at close range, not try and make them more utilitarian. I'll be the first to admit that I love the CZ3A1 and the AEK because you can just hit fire a ton of bullets at somebody and watch them die. Right, I shall regain my composure from my AEK induced bloodlust and say that that's the end of this episode. So there won't be any episodes of Battlefield 4 news next week or for most of the week after that, because I'm going to be away. There will be some Battlefield videos going up over those 2 weeks, but it will be pre-made videos, and of course I can't pre-make the news. So thanks for watching, and I'll do a couple of catch-up episodes when I get back.